The laugh that marked their doom. The Bajoran High Commander, a towering reptilian warlord named Fenris Kor, stood atop the command platform of his heavily fortified dropship, gazing down at the pitiful resistance assembled before him. The capital city of Losaria stretched out below, its once grand structures crumbling under the relentless bombardment of the Bajoran Empire's forces. The alien world was on its knees, its native population, alone, subdued, and terrified. But something unexpected had happened. Fenris scowled as his intelligence officer, a jittery Bajoran named Kralik, hurried toward him, his scaly face twisted in unease. High Commander, the remaining resistance force in the city is different. Fenris raised a ridged brow. Different? How so? Kralik hesitated, his tail flicking nervously. They are not lone. They are human. Fenris let out a booming, guttural laugh, a sound that echoed across the war chamber of his ship. The assembled Bajoran officers chuckled as well, some shaking their heads. Humans, Fenris scoffed. You're telling me the so-called protectors of the weak have come to die alongside these pitiful creatures? Kralik swallowed hard. There are only 5,000 of them, Commander. Another wave of laughter swept through the command deck. 5,000 against 50,000 Bajoran warriors and an armada of battle tanks, hovercrafts, and warships. The thought was absurd. Fenris strode to the edge of his platform, activating the ship's external speakers. His deep, resonant voice boomed across the battlefield below. Humans, you stand against the might of the Bajoran Empire with nothing but your primitive weapons and foolish courage. He sneered. Surrender now, and I will grant you a swift death. Fight, and you will be hunted to extinction. On the ground, Commander Greg Adams, the human leader, stood tall amidst his soldiers. The United Earth Expeditionary Force had come to Losaria to help the enslaved lone people, only to find themselves trapped when the Bajoran fleet blockaded the planet. Escape was impossible. But surrender? Not an option. Adams clicked his comms, responding to the High Commander's taunts. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath his words. Fenris, you talk too much. If you want this planet, come and take it. A stunned silence followed. And then the Bajorans laughed again. The battle that wasn't supposed to happen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Bajoran war machine mobilized. Massive hover tanks, each the size of a small building, roared to life, their plasma cannons charged and ready. Troop carriers spewed forth thousands of reptilian soldiers, their armor gleaming under the blood-red sky. Gunships hovered ominously, their engines screaming as they positioned themselves for a swift annihilation. Inside the human command bunker, Commander Adams watched the enemy's movements on a holographic tactical display. Around him, his officers and strategists worked feverishly. Lieutenant Sarah Vega, the unit's top weapons specialist, leaned over the table. They think we're just using basic firearms. They have no idea what we're actually packing. Adams smirked. Then let's keep it that way. Hold fire until they're close. Then we hit them where it hurts. Across the war room, Sergeant Daniel Briggs, a battle-hardened veteran, cracked his knuckles. I've seen cocky bastards before, but these lizards take the damn trophy. Let them come, Adams said. Tonight, we teach the Bajorans what it means to fear humans. Fenris gives the order. From his vantage point, High Commander Fenris signaled his artillery units to begin softening up the human positions. Fire. Reduce them to ash. The sky ignited as plasma shells arced toward the human defensive lines. Buildings exploded, sending debris flying. Fires erupted as entire blocks were reduced to rubble. And yet, the humans did not fire back. They waited. Fenris frowned, tapping his claws against the railing. Something was wrong. The primitive species he had conquered before had panicked under fire. But the humans? They held their ground. Kralik turned to his commander, his voice tinged with unease. Sir, their silence is unsettling. Fenris growled. "They're stalling. Push forward. Finish them." The first wave of Bajoran infantry surged forward. 20,000 soldiers marching in perfect synchronization, their armor glinting under the flames of war. This was it. The humans were about to be wiped from existence. The trap is sprung. The Bajoran war cry filled the air as the first squads breached the human defenses, only to realize too late that the silence was not fear. It was a setup. The moment the Bajorans reached the kill zone, Adams gave the order. Fire, and hell itself was unleashed. The air exploded with the deafening roar of railguns and Gauss rifles, hypervelocity projectiles screaming through the night. The first rank of Bajoran soldiers disintegrated, their armor offering zero protection against the sheer kinetic force of the human weapons. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of Bajoran warriors were torn apart, their bodies ripped open by high-speed metal slugs. From concealed bunkers, heavy cannons emerged, spewing hypersonic rounds that pierced enemy tanks like paper. "What is happening?" Fenris roared. His gunship swooped in to retaliate, only to be intercepted mid-air by human man-portable missile systems. Streaks of fire shot through the night as advanced guided missiles locked onto the gunships and obliterated them in seconds. Fenris' shock turned to horror. They were losing. They weren't supposed to be losing. Humanity's fury unleashed. Sergeant Briggs led his plasma-laced infantry units into the fray, charging straight at the disoriented Bajorans. No mercy. Push forward. Human soldiers, clad in lightweight combat exosuits, moved with terrifying speed, weaving through enemy fire as they gunned down Bajoran warriors with pinpoint accuracy. The Bajorans had expected a slaughter. Instead, they were being hunted. Gunships fell from the sky, tanks burned like funeral pyres, and the unstoppable Bajoran army was in full retreat. The moment of realization. From his command platform, High Commander Fenris watched the battle slip from his grasp. His elite forces were dying. His gunships were gone. His tanks were useless. And then, as the final, crushing blow, a single human transmission was broadcast across all Bajoran channels. It was Adam's voice, calm and mocking. "I told you, Fenris. If you want this planet, you're going to have to take it." Fenris finally understood. They had underestimated humans, and it was the last mistake the Bajoran Empire would ever make. The reckoning begins. The crimson dawn of war painted the sky over Lozaria, reflecting off the smoking wreckage of Bajoran war machines. Plasma fire still crackled through the air, but the tide of battle had shifted in ways that High Commander Fenris Corps had never imagined. He had expected a slaughter. Instead, his army was in ruins. His invincible Bajoran warriors, who had once crushed civilizations without effort, were now scattered, broken, and dying at the hands of a species the Galactic Council had deemed primitive. Humans. And the worst part, they weren't just fighting back. They were winning. Bajoran arrogance meets human cunning. From the charred remains of the first wave, Fenris' 2nd Division advanced, this time more cautiously. His officers barked orders, reorganizing the troops into shield formations, while their hover tanks repositioned for long-range bombardment. On the surface, it looked like a strategic response. But deep down, Fenris knew the truth. They were stalling, trying to regain control, trying to understand how a force of mere 5,000 humans had shattered an army 10 times its size. His second-in-command, Colonel Kralik, approached, his tail twitching with nervous energy. "High Commander, our reinforcements will arrive within the next planetary cycle. We just need to hold position." Fenris slammed his clawed fist into the holotable, cracking its surface. "Hold position. Hold position." He roared, his voice thick with uncontained fury. "We should have wiped them out by now. We outnumber them 10-1. And yet..." He gestured toward the battlefield, where smoke and fire painted the landscape with chaos. "We are the ones retreating." Kralik flinched, but stood his ground. Sir, these humans fight unlike any species we have ever faced. They use unconventional strategies, guerrilla warfare, and their weapons. Fenris bared his razor-sharp fangs. Their weapons, that's what I want to know about. What are they using? How are they able to bypass our shields? Kralek hesitated before responding. Railgun technology, Gauss acceleration, kinetic penetrators. Fenris narrowed his eyes. Explain. Kralek sighed. Sir, our armor is built to resist energy weapons, plasma, laser, ion cannons. We never anticipated kinetic-based projectiles moving at such speeds. These human weapons, they don't burn through our defenses like plasma. They punch through them, he gulped, like spears through soft flesh. Fenris's eyes darkened with rage. So you're telling me, these weak, fragile creatures have spent their entire history perfecting ways to kill? Kralek nodded grimly. It appears so, sir. A silence hung between them. Then Fenris grinned. A slow, cruel, predatory grin. Then it's time we remind them what real monsters look like. The Bajoran counterattack. Across the battlefield, Bajoran forces reorganized, deploying mechwalkers, massive, heavily armored bipedal war machines, bristling with pulse cannons and missile pods. Above them, orbital support ships repositioned, preparing atmospheric bombardments to scorch human positions. And at the heart of it all, Fenris himself descended from his flagship, stepping onto the war-torn battlefield to personally lead the charge. For the first time in his career, he felt something he had never felt before. Rage? Yes. Humiliation? Definitely. But beneath it all, a dark, thrilling excitement. The humans had forced him to take them seriously. Now they would suffer for it. He raised his clawed fist and roared. Warriors, burn them to ash. Inside the human war room, Commander Greg Adams had expected resistance. What he saw instead made his gut tighten. The Bajorans weren't retreating. They were coming back stronger. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Vega, analyzed the enemy formation on the holographic war table. They're deploying mechwalkers and orbital bombardment support. This isn't just a retaliation. They're going all in. Sergeant Daniel Briggs, the battle-hardened veteran, scowled. Good. I was starting to get bored. Adams wasn't so amused. If those war mechs broke through, their entire defense line would crumble. And orbital bombardment. That was a death sentence. He turned to Vega. How long until Earth reinforcements arrive? She hesitated. Unknown. The blockade is still active. We don't even know if our distress signal got through. Adams exhaled sharply. They were on their own. His mind raced through options before settling on one. It was risky, reckless. But if they didn't act now, the entire colony would be wiped out. He turned to his squad leaders. We're taking the fight to them. Humans strike first. Before the Bajoran counteroffensive could fully launch, the humans attacked first. From hidden underground tunnels, stealth units emerged, planting EMP disruptors around the Bajoran mechwalkers. Before the first wave could even fire, the sky lit up with blue pulses, electromagnetic discharges short-circuiting Bajoran systems. Massive war machines collapsed, their pilots trapped inside, unable to move. Then came the heavy artillery. Hidden mortar turrets, carefully disguised beneath debris, unleashed hell, showering Bajoran ranks with armor-piercing shells. Mechs exploded. Tanks were torn apart. The entire Bajoran front line began to break apart. And amidst the chaos, human infantry surged forward, moving like ghosts in the smoke, slaughtering everything in their path. The turning point. High Commander Fenris Corps, standing amidst the chaos, watched in disbelief. He had thought this would be an easy war. Instead, his army was crumbling. And then, his worst nightmare unfolded. From the upper atmosphere, a human transmission broadcasted on all frequencies. A voice cold, calm, and filled with deadly confidence. This is Admiral Helena Zhao of the United Earth Fleet. To all Bajoran forces, your invasion is over. Surrender now or be destroyed. And then, thunder split the sky. Earth reinforcements had arrived. A fleet of human warships broke through the blockade, dropping orbital strike teams directly into Bajoran formations. And suddenly, Fenris knew. This was no longer a conquest. This was an extermination, and the Bajoran Empire was the prey. Humanity's wrath unleashed. The skies of Lozaria burned. Human warships had pierced the Bajoran blockade, their engines roaring as they descended into the war-torn atmosphere. Orbital cannons fired with pinpoint precision, obliterating Bajoran fortifications and clearing the path for Earth's ground reinforcements. High Commander Fenris Corps, once confident in his empire's superiority, now stood on the battlefield, his yellow reptilian eyes wide with disbelief. The unstoppable Bajoran war machine, the greatest military force in the Outer Rim, was being shattered before his very eyes. And at the heart of it all, the humans. The species he had mocked. The species he had underestimated. The species that was now on the verge of annihilating his forces. The Bajoran retreat turns to panic. Across the battlefield, Bajoran forces broke formation, scrambling in disarray as the human counteroffensive struck with brutal precision. Once mighty hover tanks, their plasma cannons still smoldering, were reduced to charred wreckage as precision railgun strikes tore through their armor. The towering Bajoran mechs, once symbols of invincibility, now lay crippled in the dirt, their pilots either dead or struggling to escape the burning husks. And their foot soldiers, the fearsome Bajoran warriors, trained in centuries of conquest, were now fleeing like prey before the might of an apex predator. From his command post, Colonel Kralik, Fenris's most trusted advisor, watched in horror. "Sir, we are losing the battlefield." His voice shook, his scaled hands gripping the edge of the holotable. "The humans are pushing us back on every front. The orbital strikes have decimated our reinforcements. If we don't fall back..." Fenris slammed his fist into the console, cracking the glass display. "We do not FiHFY basic," he bellowed. "We are the Bajoran Empire. We do not FiHFY from primitive worlds." But even as he said the words, he knew the truth. This war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. And for the first time in his life, Fenris felt fear. Commander Adams leads the final charge. From the ruins of Lozaria's central district, Commander Greg Adams watched the Bajoran army break apart through the digital feed in his HUD display. The moment he had been waiting for had arrived. He clicked his comms link, broadcasting to all human forces. "This is Commander Adams to all units. The enemy is breaking. We push forward now. Drive them out." Across the battlefield, human soldiers surged forward, their exosuit-clad bodies moving with terrifying speed and precision. Sergeant Daniel Briggs, his Gauss rifle smoking from recent kills, grinned as he charged alongside his men. "Let's send these lizard bastards back to whatever swamp they crawled out of." To his right, Lieutenant Sarah Vega led a squad of rocket troopers, their shoulder-mounted launchers locking onto the last of the Bajoran mechs. "Fire!" she shouted. A volley of high-velocity missiles streaked across the war-torn city, striking the remaining Bajoran walkers with pinpoint accuracy. The massive war machines collapsed, exploding into towering infernos. Above them, Earth's gunships streaked through the sky, their turret cannons ripping into retreating Bajoran infantry, cutting them down before they could even reach their extraction points. There was no mercy, no hesitation. The humans had been outnumbered, outgunned, and underestimated. Now, they were the executioners. Fenris makes a desperate move. Inside his mobile war command center, Fenris' claws trembled as he typed a priority transmission into his holopad. He refused to believe that this was the end. There was one last option. He opened a secure channel to the Bajoran High Council, his image flickering to life in their grand chamber. The old warlords, dressed in ceremonial combat robes, stared at him in shock. "Fenris, what is happening?" one of them demanded. Fenris bared his fangs, his voice filled with desperation and fury. "Lozaria is lost. The humans have overpowered us." The chamber erupted in chaotic voices, some yelling in disbelief, others whispering in fear. "The humans," one of the elder generals scoffed. "Impossible. They are a Tier 5 species. They should be nothing." Fenris snarled, his patience gone. "Then explain why my forces are being slayed. Explain why my fleet has been broken. Explain why I, High Commander Fenris Corps, am now calling for immediate reinforcement or evacuation." Silence. The council finally understood. "We are sending reinforcements, Fenris. Hold your position. You must not let Lozaria fall." Fenris ended the call. He knew the truth. The reinforcements wouldn't arrive for hours. And by then, it would be too late. Earth's final blow. As Fenris stared at the holographic battle map, he realized his army was being surrounded. They weren't just losing ground. They were being systematically exterminated. And then, his worst fear came true. His sensors picked up a massive energy surge coming from orbit. Something was coming. Something worse than anything he had seen so far. His comm officer gasped. "Sir, we're detecting a planetary bombardment platform entering position. The humans, they're activating an orbital cannon." Fenris felt his blood run cold. Above them, in low orbit, the UEF Retribution, one of Earth's most advanced war platforms, adjusted its firing array. Inside the command deck, Admiral Helena Zhao stood, her arms folded behind her back. Her voice was calm. "Lozaria Command, this is Admiral Zhao. All ground forces, clear designated sectors. Planetary strike is imminent." On the surface, Adams received the order. "All units, pull back. The hammer is coming down." Within minutes, human troops fell back, clearing a 5-mile radius around the last Bajoran defensive holdout. Fenris, still inside his command center, watched the sky in horror as a beam of pure energy descended from space and obliterated his entire command post. The shockwave ripped through the landscape, vaporizing everything in its path. In one single strike, the Bajoran invasion had been completely annihilated. Victory, for now. In the aftermath, silence fell upon the battlefield. Human troops walked among the ruins, securing the last Bajoran survivors. The once mighty Bajoran army was now reduced to stragglers, their weapons discarded, their spirits broken. Sergeant Briggs looked down at a dying Bajoran soldier, the alien's eyes filled with disbelief. "How did you defeat us?" the alien gasped. Briggs crouched down, looking him dead in the eye. "You thought we were weak." He stood up, walking away. "You were wrong." The fall of an empire. Aftermath of a massacre. The smoke still lingered over the ruins of Lozaria. The once great Bajoran military outpost had been reduced to nothing more than charred rubble and twisted metal. The wreckage of Bajoran war machines, their once intimidating mechs, and obliterated hover tanks lay scattered across the battlefield. Human banners now waved in the wind over what was once the stronghold of an empire that had ruled the outer rim with iron claws. Commander Greg Adams stood at the center of it all, his battle-scarred armor covered in dust and ash. He could still smell the burning wreckage, the metallic tang of blood in the air, and the faint screams of the dying echoing in his mind. They had done it. Against all odds, they had broken the Bajoran invasion and turned the tide of the war. But Adams wasn't celebrating. He had fought too many battles to believe that this was the end. The Galactic Council reacts. Light years away, in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, holograms of alien dignitaries flickered as the chamber erupted into chaotic debate. This is madness. How could the Bajorans fall to a pre-FTL species in such a short amount of time? A reptilian diplomat hissed, slamming his clawed hand onto the marble table. The humans have clearly concealed their true technological capabilities. We must reassess their place in the galactic order." Another alien, a sentient crystalline entity, chimed in. At the head of the chamber, High Counselor Tyrell of the Arborian Collective, one of the oldest and wisest races in the known galaxy, steepled his hands in deep thought. The arrogance of the Galactic Council had blinded them to the reality of the situation. The Bajoran Empire had not just been defeated, they had been humiliated. The humans had not only resisted an empire that had crushed dozens of civilizations before them, but they had done so with ruthless efficiency. It was no longer a question of whether the humans were dangerous. Now, the question was, would humanity stop at Lozaria? Or would they come for the rest of the galaxy next? The Bajoran Empire fractures. Meanwhile, on the Bajoran homeworld Sorval, a storm raged both outside the Imperial Citadel and within it. Emperor Dazkor, the supreme ruler of the Bajoran Empire, stood before his war council, his scaled face twisted in fury. How did this happen? His voice thundered across the chamber, making even his most hardened generals flinch. The Bajoran military had never lost a war in centuries. They had conquered and enslaved countless worlds. Their fleets had crushed every resistance. And now, they had been brought to their knees by mere humans. A younger officer, General Tsirtek, stepped forward, his voice shaking as he spoke. "My Emperor, our forces underestimated the humans. They are not a typical Tier 5 species. Their adaptability, their technology, their sheer resilience." Dazkor's eyes blazed as he bared his fangs. "Enough," he spat, slamming his fists onto the war table. "If these vermin wish to challenge the Empire, then we will respond in kind. Summon the Imperial fleet, every dreadnought, every warship, every soldier. We will burn their homeworld to the ground. We will show them what it means to defy the Bajoran Empire." A murmur of unease swept through the war council. Even now, the high-ranking generals hesitated. They had seen the battle reports. They had seen the human weaponry, the orbital strike capabilities, and most terrifying of all, they had seen humanity's ruthlessness. The humans didn't just win wars. They annihilated their enemies. For the first time, the Bajoran High Command realized they might not survive this war. Earth's response. On Earth's Lunar Military Command, Admiral Helena Zhao stood in the command center of the United Earth Fleet, her gaze locked on a holographic projection of the Bajoran homeworld. She had received the latest intelligence reports from deep space recon teams. The Bajoran Empire was preparing a full-scale counteroffensive. They weren't going to negotiate. They weren't going to accept their defeat. They were coming. Zhao turned to the assembled Earth Defense Council, her expression unreadable. "We have two choices." She gestured to the star map, highlighting the Bajoran Empire's central systems. "We wait for them to strike, or we take the war to them." The room fell silent. Then President Elias Grant, the leader of United Earth, leaned forward. His blue-gray eyes were filled with the same determination that had led humanity to stand against impossible odds. "I won't let another alien race dictate our future. We strike first." Zhao nodded. She had expected nothing less. The hunt begins. Across human space, the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled was preparing for war. Dreadnoughts, assault carriers, and hundreds of warships were armed with the latest human weapons, advanced railgun turrets, hypersonic missiles, and next-generation stealth systems. At the center of it all, the UEF Retribution, Earth's most advanced warship, powered up its planetary destruction-class cannon. Zhao stood on the command deck, watching as the final preparations were made. She activated the fleet-wide communications channel, her voice calm yet commanding. "Soldiers of Earth, today we remind the galaxy of one simple truth." The entire fleet listened. "We did not start this war, but we will finish it." She turned her gaze to the tactical display, watching as their fleet approached the Bajoran border. advance. The engines of hundreds of warships roared to life. Humanity was on the march. And this time, they weren't just defending themselves. They were coming for the empire itself.